Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. Some of the favorites on commercial television are the shows which deal with law and order. Right here in our region, we have real-life stories with actual people who make daily decisions about crime and punishment. With us today is our special guest, Bernard Carter, who is the prosecutor for Lake County, Indiana. Welcome, Bernie, to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
You like to be called Bernie, though, don't you?
Bernie, Bernard, either. It's fine.
So, but probably to the people you're prosecuting, you want them to call you Mr. Carter?
Preferably.
To get some level of respect,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Now, you've been doing this for how many years now?
I've been prosecuting attorney now. I'm in my 21st year. Prior to that, I was a Superior Court judge for 4 years, 3.5 years actually. And I stepped off the bench to take on the prosecutor's office when John DiGiulio, who was then the prosecuting attorney, went to the U.S. Attorney's office.
Now, I was noticing our president has been in office for about 7 years, and his hair has really turned really gray. And you've been in office 21 years, and yours hasn't turned that gray yet.
Well, it's getting there. But you try to maintain the stress. I do not have the stress the president would have, that's for sure.
That's it. But your job is stressful.
Well, it's very much so. But I always say I have some excellent people who work with me, and I utilize them in a great deal. I'm always calling upon many of the senior prosecutors in my office to help me and make decisions that operate our criminal justice system.
What's the most stressful part of your job?
I think seeing young people coming in and going through the system, when you know if they had taken a different turn or gotten some education or had some mentor in their lives, they would have never made that drastic turn to the direction of crime.
So it's really kind of a sad thing to see.
Absolutely, it's very pathetic. When I was judge, I saw it over and over again, even during the short time I was on the bench. Recidivists, you try to give them probation, you try to do some kind of program where you can kind of help them, and then you see them come right back. That was the sad part about it.
How big is your staff? About just rough?
Yeah, we have about 180 employees. They have about 70 attorneys, and the rest of them are support staff, secretaries, and people who assist us in various capacities.
So Lake County, Indiana, having a population near 500,000.
500,000, that's correct.
Is having 180 people in the prosecutor's office kind of more than average? Or
it's less than average. I'll give you a comparison. Indianapolis has 220 prosecutors only, and not including their other support staff. They have 200. We have 70 prosecutors. They have 220 prosecutors, and they're double our population. They're about 1 million down there in Indianapolis, and we're about 500,000, and they have 3 times the number of prosecutors we have. So we get by pretty efficiently.
So does that mean they have more crime, or we're just more efficient up here?
I think they just lobby more for better jobs and more jobs in their office, really, and they have a little bit more money to utilize. No, their crime is about equal to ours, and certainly with their population being double ours. So we average maybe 70, 80 homicides. They may average 100 and so homicides a year.
Now, do you feel like we are disproportionate in crime here? I mean, you always kind of hear when you throw in particularly our urban communities, that we seem to have a higher rate of crime here.
Yeah. Anytime you have urban areas, you're going to have a higher rate of crime. That's certainly true. I talked to some of my fellow prosecutors who they're in counties where there's more horses and cows than people, and they rarely have a homicide. They rarely have rapes and burglaries and things of that nature. They deal with mostly DUI causing deaths, DUIs itself, and some thefts and things of that nature, because most counties have some kind of drug problem.
Is it the urban nature, or is it the urban deterioration piece? I mean,
it's a combination, and that's a good point. I'm out giving speeches all the time, and I talk to young people all the time, and I also talk to adults. And one of the things that I'm more concerned about, and I think is the cure to the criminal justice system, is solving some of these crimes and reducing some of the crimes, is the family. I mean, you have to have a united family. And when you have a united family, when the mother, the father is intricately involved in the children's lives, even if they go bad, they can correct themselves because they got that early learning and early training. When you have a lot of situations where there's broken homes and there's no father in the home, that's drastic. It's drastic for the female, it's drastic for the young boy. And when he grows up not having that love and that compassion, he goes out and look for it, and that's why the gang activity is so prevalent. These gangs feed on that. They feed that we'll be your father, we'll be your mother, we'll be your family. And these young people like that, and they want that, and they gravitate to it, and these gangs have a negative message once they come in.
What can you do, I mean, what can we do as a community to strengthen the family? You hear this from everybody. We need to strengthen the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yet, gosh, how do we do that? I mean, is there
You
even
know,
a way to do
I
it?
used to be on probably 20 different boards, and I quit all of them, and I'm on 2 boards. One on the Habitat for Humanity,
Okay.
and the other one is the Indiana Parenting Institute. And that's here in Gary, the Gary area, and Habitat is located in Gary also, but it's for the entire county. And the reason those 2 exist is you got to have housing, you got to have people having a stake in the game. So I'm real big on that. The second one is we have to train our parents, we have to work with our parents how to raise these kids. And the unfortunate thing is we have a lot of women raising young boys, and that's a dynamic that women, even though they're the best at it, they just can't handle that young person going out into the world and training them for the right things to look for in the world.
So the same way that young girls need a woman role model in their life, boys need that father
You
figure
need that
or
father,
somebody.
absolutely. And when you minus that, when I was judge, I used to keep track of all the young men who came in front of me who didn't have a father in their life. And I was in like the 90 percentile. Of every person came before me that I sentenced or that I had to make some kind of decision on some criminal act or behavior that they did, 90% of them had no father in the household.
If it's that
And I'm talking about stepfather or whatever,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter to me. I mean, because, you know, some stepfathers can be better than the real father.
If it's that clear for us that this whole parenting thing is so important, why do we seem to have such a difficult time trying to close that gap?
Because, you know, politicians, and I'm a politician, I'm an elected official, that is, and I think of myself as a politician, I think of myself as an elected official, but we have to, in the judiciary, you kind of, once you're elected, then you get away from the political aspects of it because you want to be fair to everyone. But politicians are scared to speak out on it because they think they might not get reelected. They think they may be racist if they make statements and things of that nature about the family, because a lot of people think, well, if they're talking about the inner city, they're talking about black kids. No, we're talking about all kids. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, the blacks are disproportionate. I go to black churches and I speak and I say, if we're 24% of the population in Lake County, let's be 24% of the criminal population and criminal problem. But we're disproportionate. Or less, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I always say less. But we're in the 60, 70 percentile. And in some of the major crimes, we're in the 80 percentile of the ones who have been sentenced to long terms. So we're 75% of the problem, but we're only 24% of the population. That's totally disproportionate. So I would be happy with 24%. It is what it is, but we don't have that. And some people really dislike me for saying that, particularly in the African-American community, because they say, well, you're focusing on it too much. Well, if it's a reality that I see every day, you need to talk about it, and we need to change it. What happens is politicians don't want to talk about it, so they ignore it. And then they put money in different areas that have nothing to do with solving the true crime problems. And I think the family and working with these young people at an early age is the true way, and we should have the majority of our monies put into those areas as opposed to waiting until after they commit the offense, after they hooked on heroin or after they hooked on crack cocaine, and then so let's try to correct them now. The correcting part is very difficult.
You know, we should make sure we're clear on, we'd like that number to shift down, but not shift to another population. Right? We'd like the whole all crime to come down.
Well, I think if the African-American crime reduces, the total number will reduce, because with the African-American crime reducing, people are not going to, the whites are not going to go out and say, well, we're going to commit more crimes, or the Italians are not going to go out and say, we're going to commit more times. You know, it's interesting to me that we have substantial populations like the Jewish community, like the Asian community. They don't get involved in these crimes in our community. They do not. The young people don't get involved in and it's not an economic thing, it's a family thing, it's a cultural thing.
Well, you know, if that's the case, that there's this perception and the reality that the minority has a higher crime rate, I mean, you'll hear this prejudice that comes out from people say, well, we don't want those people to move into our community because they're going to bring that crime with them. I mean, is that justified? I hope not.
Yeah, no, I don't
see where that fear comes
I don't
from.
think it's justified, but the media concentrate. If you go, I don't care where you go in this country, and I've been fortunate to travel a little bit within our continental borders, and if you turn on, if you're in Orlando, or if you're in LA, or you're in Chicago, or you're in New York, and you turn the news on, the first 5 minutes of it, if it's not an international story, it's a local story, and it's involving African Americans. So that there, I think, controls the mind of all, African Americans as well as Caucasians as well as any other race, and they're thinking, well, these must be bad people. They must have problems, or I don't want to live around that. And so that's a natural reaction that extract me from that. Well, and that's what you've seen.
How much part of that is natural due to, in an urban setting, you have a higher population percentage of minorities,
Yes.
number one, and then that's a major market in terms of TV. So they're just projecting out this image of, look at all this crime with all these minority
Absolutely.
people.
That's very
but
true.
Some will say that's being intentionally done. Do you think it is, or it's just by circumstance that's the population base?
I think it's by circumstance that's the population base, but the media certainly want to echo that because bad news is good news to a great extent. And our media, nationally as well as local, buy into that big time. They really do.
So there's still
So
some
it's
of that
fear
prejudice.
mongering.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. They do more harm, but I'm not saying they should ignore it though. So it's a tough question.
Right.
I don't think they should ignore it. I want to know what's going on in my community. So if some rapist is raping people, I don't care whether he's white or black. I want to know about it so I can protect my daughter, I can protect my home, and I can be a little bit more conscious. So you want to know that too. So it's a mixed bag. It really is. I think the reality of it is it goes back to what I've indicated many times, and I'll continue to focus on that. Is you got to work with that family, work with these young people, and you keep them out of those types of situations.
So at the beginning of the show, I talked about everybody likes to watch Law and
Yes,
Order
yes.
and all these shows on TV where
Yes.
it shows the prosecutors working so closely. In fact, they show the prosecutors often out investigating the crimes.
Absolutely.
So how close is that to reality? You'll hear some people say
yeah.
it's not even close to reality, and you'll hear say
Yeah,
sometimes
it's very close to reality. I think they do a great job of the account of the crime. We have just as sensational, if you will, heinous crimes anywhere in the country.
We're not proud of that, though,
Yeah,
right?
no, we're not proud of it. No, but it's everywhere though. You go to Chicago, you go in any inner city, it's there. It really, Indianapolis is really flooded with it. They have their good areas in Indianapolis. They focus on that, but they have their bad areas, and they have some tremendous crimes. So when they show a program on television where they show a homicide or a rape or whatever the case may be, we have those same similar crimes. Now, how they report on it and how they investigate it is totally different. I mean, it's not reality. They saw those cases.
So the TV is not the reality.
Absolutely. They get DNA analysis done in 5 minutes. We take 6 months. And that's a reality. 6 months is a reality. And that's a good time. That's a good time to get some of those results back. So that's totally different. They solve those cases in 2 hours, an hour, half an hour, and we solve them sometimes, it takes years. So that's the part that's not a reality.
So
and
sometimes they also show the prosecutors right out there practically in the middle of the crime investigation.
Yeah,
does that really happen?
Yeah, that does happen.
Right next
It
to the
does
police?
happen, and we're doing more and more of that because we're assisting police officers at the scene on how we're going to present that case. We're thinking about showing it to a jury. They're thinking about showing the case to a judge to get probable cause to charge this person. So we're doing more and more of that. In fact, we're now initiating the countywide homicide unit that we're getting off the track. It's going to take a number of months and perhaps even a year to get it really going the way we want it to go. But, and that's one of the main purposes of that, so we can work hand by hand, prosecutors can work hand by hand, shoulder by shoulder with law enforcement when they're investigating and solving these crimes. When the Gary police officer was killed last year, myself and several of my attorneys were there at the scene on every stage, and they had the FBI, they had more than 70 law enforcement officers, FBI, DEA, everyone out there, local law enforcement, and we were there getting search warrants, doing the things that we needed to get so they could further their investigation. So no, you see more and more of that. That's very true.
So how good is our law enforcement community here? I mean, and you'll hear criticisms of it. And what level of cooperation do you see between all of our...
I just recently met with all the chiefs of police in my office of all the various departments. We have about 19 different police departments, including the state police. And we had a great meeting in my office. And I tell you, they're brilliant individuals. They do a great job. And they really have the training that they can kind of hand down to their officers on the streets and really relate the best practices. And I'm very proud of our law enforcement.
And there's a lot of cooperation these days.
Tremendous cooperation, not only with the locals, but also with the federal government. I'm a member of the HIDA task force. It's a federal task force sponsored and funded by through the Congress. Pete Voskowski was able to get us a great grant, and we've had it for the last 12 years, I believe. And it does a lot of drug interdiction, drug investigations, and things of that nature. So, and that's done with all the federal agencies at the table, as well as I believe there's 4 chiefs of police at that table and myself.
And that cooperation wasn't always there, but it's really improved,
No, it wasn't.
Right?
Many times in the past, and I've been around to see some of it, there's fences or territorial. And now everybody says there's no fences, there's no territory, we're here to help you. And they truly mean that. So we see a lot better cooperation in that.
In your 21-year career, if you look back upon that, what was that one case that you just was the most challenging or most difficult you had to face?
I did a death penalty case years ago. Virginia Cates was the victim. She lived in Maryville. This contractor came to her house and did some work. He had one of the helpers who was helping him, saw something he wanted. So after hours, he came back to the house. She let him in. She was a very giving lady. She was in her 80s. He robbed her. He had another person with her. She knew him from being the contractor helper that was there. So he had to kill her in his mind. So he took her in his car and took her to the Georgia Bridge over off of 94 in Gary and dumped her off in the bridge. A semi-truck came and smashed her, and her body was so torn that we had to identify her through Dr. Moses' office with her lens, eyeglass lens. A quarter of her eyeglass lens was the only thing left that we could really, and he identified that through a prescription through her. And that's the only way when I introduced that evidence into court, how I proved that who she was, because you have to prove the person lived and who that person was in a murder case. And that's the only reason I could prove that that was the same person that was kidnapped from her home. That case touches me more than any other case, and I've done 5 death penalty cases.
And why did that one touch you more than any other one?
It was just so senseless and so, I don't know. It was just this woman is just living her life, beautiful home nestled here in Maryville, and she just was living a good life, talking to her family and all that stuff. And he just came into her life and just disrupted it for a couple $100. And it's just senseless. And I thought.
So has there been a case that, again, in these 20 years, it just has kept you awake at night? I mean, when you look back upon it, you go, man, this really bothers me.
Yeah, I have one now that's unsolved. We think we know who did it. We think we know why that person did it. A 13-month-old baby was kidnapped, carjacked. The mother was shot, thrown out of the car. The baby was taken 2 blocks away from the scene where the mother was shot, left for dead, but she did not die. And the baby was shot twice in the chest.
Wow. And
killed, of course. And we had a subject, and we still have a subject, but we just don't have enough evidence to prove that 2 individuals, that they were involved in it. So I'm always asking anybody with any information on that case, is a baby Shaw is the child's name. If anybody has any information on that case, we'd like to get in contact with them so we can kind of put that case to rest. The grandmother, the mother, the family, that baby deserves justice. So that case, I got a picture on my desk of that child, a newspaper clipping that I put in a frame. It's on my desk along with my kids. It just means so much to me that we try to solve that, because for somebody to intentionally kidnap a child and execute that child, it doesn't get any worse than that. 13 months old. The child would be 7 years old now. We just had a memorial service 2 weeks ago, when we spoke at the scene where the child died, and just talked, to everyone and about how we can still solve that case. But we don't have enough information to charge. That bothers me more than any case.
And that is pretty. There's no doubt that that's horrible. You often hear about the lack of cooperation, sometimes particularly in communities that are kind of afraid that you can't get people to step forward and give evidence or testimony, or just won't report things.
Yes.
Why is that fear, or what is that? Is that because of fear, or what holds people back?
And that does hurt a lot of communities. You look at the communities that don't have crime or a lot of crime, it's not necessarily economics, even though economics play a big part in it, because you can kind of protect yourself by living in a subdivision or whatever, but it's still crime everywhere, because you hear that all the time. People say, I didn't think that could happen in my community. It could happen in any community, but it doesn't happen as a general rule. In some of the more urban areas, it's a general process. So I think what happens is when the community don't speak out, when the community, if you see some drug activity going on next to your house, you're going to call the police. I'm pretty sure you are. You're going to say, hey,
I'm one of those that does.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I applaud you for that, and I would do the same thing. So a drug dealer is not going to move next door to you then, because they're not going to stay there that long. But if you're scared to call and don't want to call, and they continue to do the drug dealing, then it's just going to exist, and it's going to harm you and your family, because there's criminal activity going on. There's gunfighting that's associated with that. It's a lifestyle that's associated with that, and that's not good for a community. And
no matter how you educate those people, that fear still seems to override that ability to step forward.
Absolutely.
So is there any way to change that?
My whole thinking is education, And I don't mean by educating them on calling in, I mean on just getting a good education. People who have a tendency to have a stake in the game, who has an opportunity to advance themselves, they're not going to tolerate it. So if you think, some people just giving up. They're just so scared, or they just think, I'm not going to be able to make it, so why should I complain? And other people are saying, I don't want this for my children, I don't want this for myself, I'm going to make sure this stops. So they're the ones who are at the public forum. I go to a lot of public forums, and it's always the people who don't need to be there are there. Which are still good people to be there and voice out, but the people whose kids are causing all the problems, if I had a child who's causing all those problems, I would want to be there so I can listen to what they're saying, so I can try to help my family rid itself of that situation.
When you're doing these public forums, is there a question you just hate that somebody brings up, or a comment that's made and it's like, oh?
Yeah, well, most of it is based on, I think, economics. People think that, rich people don't have those kind of problems, or wealthy people or middle-class people don't have those kind of problems, and the system don't help poor people. And I don't think that's awfully true, in my opinion. I get criticized for this position sometimes because people say, oh, no, it's economics. Well, it may be economics, but you can raise yourself from one level to another level in this country. Very, very, not necessarily easily, but there's a transition that you can do. Some people choose not to do it. When you go out and get on drugs, drugs has nothing to do with being poor. But when you go out and get on drugs, then you're going to blame the system. You can't do that. You got to clean yourself and get yourself rid of drugs, and then go out there for all those opportunities. They're pushing vocational school, they're pushing all types of training and things of that nature. If I had to work at, I don't care whether it's McDonald's or whether it's a grocery store or whatever it is, I'll work that until I can do better. And I've had all those jobs. One of the interesting things, when I interview people and they tell me they worked at McDonald's and they worked at Burger King, or they worked cutting grass at a grass cutting company.
You said, so did I?
Oh, yeah. No, I say so do I, and I say this is a guy or a young lady who can be in this office. Because they can take orders, they can start off, they can work jobs and be satisfied till they advance themselves.
So we're down to about 30 seconds. So
Yes.
If there was one message you would like to give to the general public, what would that be?
Okay, one of the truest things that I do is the Indiana Parenting Institute. I volunteer, I'm on the board of directors. One of the things is we have to talk to parents. Parents need to talk to parents, talk to themselves in terms of what they're going through, and try to get some kind of conversation with these children and these young people to say, we're there for you and we can help you. The reality of it is, in my opinion, if you have a child, you need to be in that child's life. Because by being in that child's life, you're going to correct some things that normally that child won't have to go through.
So I'll add to that message.
Yes.
All adults need to be working with the kids and helping strengthen
Absolutely.
These families.
Absolutely, very much so.
I appreciate your commitment to this and the enthusiasm you have and the position you take. So appreciate that leadership in our community, and thanks for being here today,
Well, it's a
Bernie.
pleasure to be in here.
All right, thanks. One of the most talked about subjects in our communities is crime. Everyone is concerned for their safety and hopefully the welfare of others. Law enforcement resources are often stretched thin and challenged to keep all of us out of harm's way. Time and time again, you will hear our police and court officials telling us how important it is for the average citizen to be vigilant and cooperative. Being educated about how you can be affected and how you can prevent or reduce crime is the first step. Being aware and observing safe practices are essential. Your diligence may prevent or obstruct a potential criminal act. Cooperation is the second key and equally vital. When you see something that is unusual, out of the ordinary, or seems strange, report it. Police will say, I'd rather respond to a false alarm than find out later that someone did not call and something bad happened. Your eyes and ears can be that front line of defense. Law enforcement personnel cannot be everywhere. Your action and reporting may be the difference that prevents or stops a crime. Thanks for watching our show. Have we enlightened you or made you more aware of what is going on in our communities? Your reactions and thoughts would be interesting to hear. You can send them to our email address, which is listed on your screen. If you have not taken a look at our website, you should. There is so much to see. Go to www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org. From the website, you can watch past Lakeshore Focus episodes. Click on the TV tab, scroll down alphabetically until you see Lakeshore Focus. Another click, and you can see a list of previously aired shows. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.